It's my immense pleasure to now introduce our next speaker, Igor Levit, who after his amazing performance at the DLD Berlin is back at DLD here in Munich. He needs no introduction. I'm sure many of you have seen the amazing piece on Igor in last week's New York Times, celebrating him as one of the greatest pianists of our time. Igor has just had a concert this morning here in Munich, which ended, I think, an hour ago, and we're very delighted to have him here on stage. Please give a very, very warm welcome to Igor Levit. So, Igor, I wanted to begin with the very beginning and wanted to ask you how it all began. How did music come to you, and how did you come to music?
First of all, hi. Good to be here. So we're going back to the time I was 3 years old, so I can't really remember too much. All I can say is music was in the house. Music was there all the time. My mother used to play. She's teaching now. She's professor at the university in Hanover. So there was always music, and there was this thing, the piano. I didn't know what it was. I saw it. I saw that there was sound coming out, and so I walked there on short legs and pressed the first key, and till today never stopped. That's the short version.
And a slightly longer version? Who were your heroes? Were there sort of heroes or heroines who inspired you?
Well, for sure, no heroes at the age of 3, but so the hero was my mother. So there was I looked there and I watched her play and teach, and I thought, that's where I want to be. And I can't really define my heroes until this very day. So the variety of heroes it's really broad, between musicians, some politicians, some writers, some thinkers, some friends. It really depends. I've never been more inspired by anything than people. So whenever I had the chance to travel since the age of 13, and the only reason I would travel was to meet people. So these were my heroes, whoever I met.
And we were introduced to each other about 2 years ago when our friend Alex Poots, whom I mentioned before, the former director of the Manchester International Festival, who now runs The Shed, a new interdisciplinary organization in New York City. It's the first institution which will be on the move, because the Diller Scofidio Renfrew building literally, moves on wheels and can change its position in the city, which is a very old idea. Cedric Price, which John Littlewood had in the 60s when they wanted to build the Fan Palace as a kind of interdisciplinary cultural institution which would be movable and not static. And when we visited your apartment in Berlin, it was one of my most profound experiences ever with music, because you played for us the piano, and we spoke mainly about 3 composers, because I asked you there the usual question about heroes and heroines. And we talked about Beethoven, we talked about Bach. I think today you played Bach in Munich. And then we talked about Frederick, whom I was much less familiar. So I wanted to ask you to tell us a little bit about that first conversation, and why you mentioned these 3 names.
Well, it has a lot to do with the fact that each of these 3, Bach, Beethoven, and Frederick, each of them composed a major work for the piano, a major variations piece for the piano. Johann Sebastian Bach wrote his magnificent Goldberg variations. Beethoven composed what I think probably the most outstanding piece of piano music I know, the Diabelli variations. And Frederick in the mid-70s wrote a 60-minute piece which is called The People United Will Never Be Defeated. And it's based on the most famous, probably Chilean song, revolutionary song, which people were singing against the Pinochet regime, El Pueblo Unido. So Frederick, who is American, who is 79 years old now, lives in Brussels, and what I think one of the most essential composers of our time, wrote this incredible piece of music. And I think back then when we met, I was in the middle of recording these 3 pieces, and so that's, I think, how, you know, that conversation came up.
And I then went to see Rzewski in Brussels. You know, I went to interview him. He is quite resistant to actually, you know, to appear, or also to, you know, he encounters the idea that people would like his work with a certain degree of resistance. Resistance is very much at the core of his work. He's an incredibly political composer. Can you tell us a little bit more about him? Because I think it's very important that more people know about Frederick Rzewski.
So Frederick was born in 1938 in Massachusetts. He himself developed an incredible career as a pianist, playing contemporary music. He was very close to Karlheinz Stockhausen, to John Cage, to Morton Feldman, to David Tudor. He became this, you know, really main figure in performing contemporary piano music and also electronic music, improvising whatsoever. But Frederick, first and for all, also is, and already was there, an incredible composer. Having said that, one must understand Frederick also is an incredibly political figure. He's a communist, still very much so. He believes in free art. He doesn't believe in publishing. I should not quote what he thinks publishers are. We are running too early. Well, I can give you one example. He thinks that they are Peruvian terrorists, drug dealers, I'm sorry. He developed the idea of writing music, being paid for writing music once and then just give it for free in the internet. So, and this has an incredible also artistic implication, because it is, of course, the never-ending discussion in my world, and I'm sure in all art world, is who is actually the owner of, let's say, the musical piece or the piece of art. Who does it belong to? Is it the composer? Is it the performer? Is it the viewer or the listener? Now, if a composer says, okay, I wrote that piece and I wrote it for everyone, it's out there for free in the world, do whatever you want with it, so it belongs to everyone and to no one, I find it a kind of appealing and beautiful idea. And so this idea about freedom is very strong in Frederick, and he became one of the most important friends and inspiring figures of my life.
You
Probably
also
a hero.
told me whenever we met that the DLD variations, and you mentioned them before, already in our conversation here at DLD, are for you the most important work. And you showed me also the scars, which, I mean, is a great artist book, the facsimile, one of the greatest artist books I've ever seen, the facsimile, you know, reprint of the scars of the DLD variation. Can you maybe tell us what you told me the other day in Berlin in such a beautiful way, why this is for you the most important piece of music?
Oh, I can't recall our conversation exactly.
In a different way, maybe, you know?
But it's an incredibly, I mean, I won't get into analyzing the piece, but you have to imagine it is the most unpredictable, sort of chaotic, yet absolutely perfect, humane, crazy piece of music imaginable. Everything what you can imagine a human being is about, in terms of humor, suffer, joy, you know, it's all there. I remember once playing this piece. It's also around about 60 minutes long. I remember once playing this piece, and then a lady came to see me backstage, and I can almost quote exactly what she said to me. She was absolutely, you know, blown away by the piece, and then she said, Mr. Levit, I don't understand that. And I said, how can I help you? And then she said, well, listening to this piece, it felt like I'm in the kitchen, standing in front of a, you know, empty pot, and I'm making a soup. And I thought, what the hell are you talking about? I never really linked the Diabelli variations to a soup, but then she said, it's like putting in ingredients in the pot, which has nothing to do with each other, nothing. Some of them fit together, some of them don't, but it's sort of a chaos theory, like throwing in stuff. It's black and white and fast and slow and sad and happy and everything squeezed together in an incredible kind of intense way. And it doesn't make any sense. But once you reach the end, you suddenly realize this is the most perfect arc and absolutely with no alternative. That's the way how it should be. And I can assure you that I've performed this piece, I don't know, 350 times, and it's still this one piece. I sit at the piano, I play it, and I can't believe my ears every time I play it. I cannot believe what I'm actually hearing. It's quite extraordinary.
I was thinking also to connect it to what Nora was showing us before, the way how practices evolve now, art practices related to AR and VR. The visit in your apartment in Berlin was a profoundly analog experience. I mean, we looked at books and we're listening to you play the piano in the most magical way and discussed music. And I think it never really switched on the light. It got dark, and somehow, there was really no technology involved. But I read in an interview that when you were actually asked what kind of music you would take on an island, the most important thing would be that there is a good internet connection so that you could have live streaming. And I suddenly thought, like, wow, maybe actually the digital did somehow change something for you, or it's kind of a bigger question, but I was just curious what for a pianist, it means, the digital reality.
I don't know what it means for a pianist. I know what it means for me, and it basically revolutionized the way I access art and music entirely. I mean, I'm a frequent Twitter user. I'm not, such a fan of anything else in the social media world. So I find Twitter very interesting, but also artistically, because it, I've heard since I was a child, I would hear these things. Someone would tell me, "Oh, music is the universal language," or "Everyone understands music," But if you look at it carefully, it's not very honest, because if you look at what music is actually played and performed, it's a very small percentage of the canonic repertoire. But it's not that the Western civilized world, classical music society, is very much interested in what is actually happening outside of the world. So if you name something international, you gotta act like that or stop talking. And so when I discovered the social media and the internet, it actually gave me I understood that it gives me the chance in real time to see what music is written or performed or made on literally the other side of the planet in that very moment. That was incredible. It gives me the chance to communicate with musicians from the other side of the planet in real time. I can, record a video of me playing Bach, I don't know, send it to a musician, to an artist in Western Africa, and vice versa. So, and that is absolutely incredible. And then someone asked me the other day and said, "Oh, that's interesting. So how did this artist from Africa reacted to Bach?" And kind of an odd question. And then I said, well, believe it or not, he knew exactly what and who Bach was. It's not like he lives on the moon. But here comes the thing. He knew exactly what I was doing. I had no idea about what he was doing. I was the guy from the moon. I was the guy who had no idea. I was the guy who had to learn. And I find that A, very important. B, we spoke about this ignorance, and I think you told me that the art world went through this change of mind 20, 30 years ago, and I think the music world is in desperate need of this development. Otherwise, it's just pure sort of bigotry we are going through.
Yeah, and you were actually talking about that the other day. It's, I think, a very, very important point, this idea that the canon of composers still is very Western-centric. And you said there are many amazing composers actually on our continents. And I think you were saying that to kind of map that is something you're interested in, right?
And that's what the internet and that's what this sort of, the social media gives you the chance really to see and to hear and to listen and to experience and to communicate with these people. That is absolutely inspiring.
Now, when I saw Maria Lasnik, the great Austrian painter, she was in her 90s, it was my last visit with her. Just before she died, she told me a lot about her friend Brendel, the pianist, now retired, and told me about his parallel reality of writing poems, subsequently read his poetry. So I was kind of wondering about your parallel reality, if there is poetry or if there's anything else you do. Particularly, one question also came to my mind, because very often, great pianists also at a certain moment compose. So I was wondering if you ever envisaged a kind of a transition into composing.
Not composing, I do improvise more and more. And by saying that, and that's also a big part of improvising and encouraging me to improvise was because I met Frederick. So I do sometimes, I'm on stage and I play something and then I never think about improvising before I actually reach that point of, how you would say, urgency to improvise. And then improvisation can be anything. I can run around the piano, or I can speak. Or Frederick once suggested me to just stop in the middle of a Beethoven sonata and to tell a joke. I've not done that yet. But I'm waiting for that perfect moment. But no, I don't compose. I might one day, who knows? But parallel reality, I don't have a parallel reality. I'm very, very much here and now. So I'm not in need of parallel realities.
I think it's a good moment to open it up for questions from the floor. If you have questions for Igor. Yeah, we've got a question here. Do we need the microphone, or it's a question in the third row?
Hi, my name is Lisa, and I'm also a musician, not full-time, but I love music as well. I'm having a similar experience as you have as a kid to, really kind of being immersed into music. And I'm wondering, what can we learn as a community of people that are interested in design and technology from what you've been learning from music so far?
Of all kinds of art I have experienced so far, and I don't want to rate. I don't want to say what's better or worse. But the unique thing about music is that you can't touch it. You just can't. It's kind of simple, I think. It doesn't belong to. It belongs to everyone. It doesn't belong to anyone. It just exists between the two of us. And so when I'm on stage and you listen, or vice versa, the only difference between the two of us is I'm the guy who presses down the key. Otherwise, we hear the same thing. What we do with it and what we experience, of course, is incredibly, it's totally different. And I think what I have learned and understood more and more by making music and by speaking to artists of all kinds is to encourage people to listen not to what I tell them they should hear. So I would never stand on stage and say, okay, in 2 hours when you will hear this Beethoven sonata, this is what you should hear. This is what this piece is about. I would never dare saying that. Be free and be curious and be open and hear what you want in the end. And it's limitless. And for example, when was the Goldberg variation? So 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So 3 years ago,
That was at the Armory.
That was at the.
And it's actually, I'm very glad you talk about that, because it's something I wanted to ask you, because that's a wonderful collaboration between you and Marina Abramovic, who is, of course, a friend of DLD and has been here many times. So it would be great to hear more about that.
So Marina and I had the idea of working with Bach's Goldberg variations. Alex Poots, who we again have to mention here, never enough, connected Marina and me, and we spoke about this piece, which is this incredible experience to listen to and to play. And any of you who knows the piece or doesn't, just to put it simple, it begins with this incredible aria. You go through 85 minutes long journey, and the piece ends with the same aria as in the beginning, but in the end, you're a completely different person. So this sort of circle is an incredible experience, and Marina came up with a great idea, I think, to go into the Park Avenue Armory in New York to sort of make the setting, to set the people in a circle, to make the light, etc., and to give me the space to play the Goldberg variations. But what she also did is she forced everyone, and by saying that, I include myself, which was very tricky in the beginning, to, before the piece began, to spend 30 minutes together in this Park Avenue Armory with headphones on, how you call them, the silent headphones, yeah. No mobile phones, no watches, nothing, pure silence for 30 minutes. I thought before I did it the first time, I thought that Marina was completely crazy, because I thought I need my time to focus. I can't sit in some space for 30 minutes, do nothing, and then play 85 minutes long Bach, which sounded sort of crazy. Well, today I must say this was the greatest way to focus I can possibly imagine. Because there's one thing to focus backstage in your room, being alone, and then you know then you walk on stage, and anyway your focus is ruined. The light is different, the setting is different, everything's different. But to focus with the people together in the room where actually the music will happen was an absolutely unique experience. And it gave everyone, and I include myself, the time to realize whatever is going to happen now, it's about me. It's about myself. So, and that's what I try to achieve is when I'm on stage, of course in the end I play for myself, obviously. But I try to encourage people to understand that I'm a listener. I just press down the key, that's the only difference, but I'm a listener, you're the listener. So we are in a way sort of equal. And either we experience that together, or I will quit my job.
That could not be
quit my work.
And to conclude, I want to read you the post-it. As you all know, my Instagram continues with artists, writing handwritten post-it notes in collaboration with Bettina Korek and For Your Art, the Global Handwriting Project. And Igor wrote over lunch, "A genius is the one most like himself." Igor, thank you very, very much. Thank you all.